Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked on Wolves. Today on the show, we're talking all about the Timberwolves and the free throw line and personal fouls drawn by them versus committed by them on the defensive end. What's the deal with the disparity? How does that stack up to some of the league's best and worst defenses over the past couple of seasons? And what does that mean moving forward? Also, Anthony Edwards and some of his recent struggles at the rim. How much of just a bump in the road is this for Ant? And then also a look at the upcoming schedule, which gets really difficult for the Timberwolves and the matchup against the Nets on Friday night. It's all upcoming on Locked on Wolves. Welcome into the show.
You are Locked on Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked on Wolves podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Beecken. I'm the host of Locked on Wolves. I'm also the editor of Dunking with Wolves, the Timberwolves site on the Fansided Network. Today's episode is brought to you by Truebill. Truebill is the new app that saves you money by helping you identify and stop paying for the subscriptions you don't want or need, and can even negotiate better deals on those you want to keep. Happy Friday, everybody. Happy weekend, and happy Timberwolves game day. We have a packed show today on the weekend, the Friday show, leading into Wolves Nets. A lot to talk about. First of all, thank you for making Locked on Wolves your first listen each and every day. Remember, the show is free and available on all platforms. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your audio platforms, Apple, Google, Spotify, and of course, the all-new Odyssey app. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Locked on T-Wolves and at Beecken with two B's, two E's, C-K-E-N. All right, today on the show, I want to talk about the Timberwolves and the foul line. I want to talk about the fouls committed. We've talked about this a lot on the show already. The Wolves are tops in the league in fouls committed per game. But how does that compare to the past couple of seasons, to the league as a whole? What does that mean for their defense as a unit? And also look at the issues the Wolves had drawing fouls on offense. So I want to talk about both sides of that coin. Then we'll talk about Anthony Edwards at the rim. I talked about this a little bit in the post game after Wednesday's loss. Ant missed a few more layups. Where does he stack up? How is he doing finishing at the rim compared to where he probably should be based on league average? And then we'll finish by looking at how difficult this Timberwolves schedule is over the next few weeks, and also the Wolves Nets game coming up tonight, Friday night. Okay, so related to Timberwolves and personal fouls, the Wolves have been basically first all season in personal fouls per game, league wide. And there's lots of different ways we can kind of slice this. And I pointed this out in the past, but the Wolves have been number one in fouls per game. Currently, they commit 23.1 personal fouls per game. The next closest team is 20.6. That means it's 2.5 full fouls more per game for the Wolves. By the way, there's three teams that are between 20 and 21 per game. There's four more, or excuse me, no, wow, that like 10 more between 19 and 20. So there's a massive gap between the Timberwolves and like the next 10 teams that all, in terms of how many personal fouls per game. That's one way to measure it. Of course, that doesn't take into account pace, number of possessions per game. And so we could look at free throw attempts by opponent per field goal attempt by opponent. So that's exactly what it sounds like. For every field goal attempted by the opponent, how many free throws do they also attempt? Timberwolves are also dead last in that category, probably not surprisingly, at 0.217. And again, it's not close. The next closest team is the Chicago Bulls at 0.202. So the Timberwolves have a full 1.5, a full free throw and a half more per field goal each game allowed because of their foul problems. So they're dead last in opponent free throw attempts per field goal attempts, and dead last in personal fouls per game. Not good. Talked about this. I think it was this show right before Thanksgiving, maybe right before the Heat game last Wednesday, about 10 days ago, when I talked about, hey, if the Wolves could improve their defensive rebound and if they could not foul so much, they'd be a top 10 defense easily. Well, I mean, they're still sitting, what are they, number 9 right now? Yeah, number 9 coming into play on Thursday. This doesn't include Thursday night's games. Number 9 in defensive rating, defensive efficiency, according to Basketball References metric. And they're still dead last in defensive rebound percentage and in free throw, personal fouls per game and opponent free throw attempts per field goal attempt. So how does that look compared to the rest of the league? Well, I already talked about how they're by far the worst in each of those categories. The second worst team in terms of personal fouls per game is the Miami Heat. They're 11th in defensive rating. So they're only 2 spots behind the Timberwolves. The second worst team in opponent free throw attempts per field goal attempts is the Chicago Bulls. They're 7th in defensive rating. You look at the at the bottom 5, the teams that commit the most fouls per game and allow essentially the most free throws per game based on number of opponent shots. Um, of those 10 teams, so we're talking bottom 5 in each category, 7 of them are top 15 defenses. So the only outliers are Houston, who's just a bad team, and they're 19th in defense. So still not even a bottom 10 defense. And they're 5th in each category. And then Toronto's 3rd in free throw attempts, 3rd worst in free throw attempts allowed per opponent field goal per attempt. They're 23rd. But everybody else is top 15. And we're talking the Timberwolves and the Bulls as both top 10 defenses that are in the bottom 2 in those categories. So there isn't a direct correlation necessarily between frequency of fouling and allowing opponents to shoot free throws and overall defensive success. Go back to last season, the 2020-21 season, a similar story. It's more of a mixed bag. I mean, Golden State was 2nd worst in both categories. They were the 5th best defense in the league last year. The Knicks were the 5th worst team in terms of free fouls per game, and they were they were the 3rd best defense. But it's mixed in. It's kind of like the Timberwolves were the 25th ranked defense last year, and they were bottom 5 in both categories last year. You got a bunch of teams kind of in that 15 to 25 range. 2 years ago, the 1920 season, more of the same, a lot more teams in the teens and 20s. There's only one top 10 defense in there. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, first of all, the direct correlation between fouls committed by a defense and having a bad defense, it's not quite as direct as you would think it would be, right? You would assume that the teams that commit the most fouls, that give up the most free throw attempts, would be the league's worst defenses. It's more likely that that's true, but that's certainly not exclusively the case. Again, Golden State and the Knicks last year, go back a couple of years, the Clippers were a top 5 defense that were bottom 5 in fouls allowed per game or fouls committed per game. And then this year, the Timberwolves, the Bulls, the Pacers are 12th, by the way, in defensive rating, and they're 4th on this list in both categories this season. The second thing that tells us is that we're only a quarter of the way through this season, and season's not over today. So this thing has time to kind of correct itself, right? So what does that mean? It means that eventually this is likely to catch up to the Timberwolves. They've had some good fortune in terms of still winning games, despite the fact that they're fouling like crazy, right? That could very well eventually catch up to the Timberwolves, and that's something they have to be really cognizant of. So it goes back to the conversation from last week, defending without fouling. Can the Timberwolves figure out how to defend without fouling? Because eventually it's going to catch up to them in some way, shape, or form. The other thing is the point that I made last week. If the choice is, this is I don't know, this is oversimplifying it, admittedly, but if the choice is playing aggressively and committing a foul and allowing some free throws versus just simply not being aggressive, not blocking shots, not getting steals, not contesting shots on the perimeter, not trying to fight through screens, not trying to get over screens, just playing drop coverage and sitting back and allowing a few extra dunks or layups or wide open threes per game, you obviously want to be more aggressive and force the official to blow their whistle. And I've said this a lot on the show, but I want to reiterate this. If 9 times or, say the opponent gets 10 shots in the paint and you're not contesting them, they're going to make at least 9 out of 10 of those shots, right? If you're contesting them, you might get called for a couple of fouls, maybe 3-4 fouls out of 10. But the ones you're not getting called, they're not going to call a foul every time. First of all, hopefully you're not actually fouling every time. Second of all, they're not going to call it every time. So the aggressive defenses are always going to be the better defenses. Now, there's obviously a point of diminishing returns there. You don't want to be the team that commits the most fouls. You don't want to be the team that allows the most free throw attempts against you. But you'd rather err on that side than err on the lackadaisical hands-off defense that we've seen far too often throughout Timberwolves history. So, I think that I'd rather the Timberwolves be in this spot, be the number 9 defense and still struggle with fouls, than obviously be a 20th ranked defense that never fouls, right? I mean, there's no comparison there. But will this catch up to them? So sitting here today, essentially a quarter of the way through the season, I feel really good about the Timberwolves defense, and I think this is correctable. Certainly Jaden McDaniels and Karl-Anthony Towns have been two of the biggest culprits in terms of committing a lot of fouls individually. I also think that Timberwolves games have not necessarily been officiated all too evenly. I think we'll say it. I'm just going to briefly touch on this because, again, quarter of the way through the season, I don't know if this is a true trend or not yet. But the Timberwolves are, again, dead last in terms of allowing fouls per game and opponent free throws per field goal attempt. They're number 22 in free throw attempts per field goal attempt on offense. So they're 22nd in essentially free throw rate as a team. However, They're 10th in the league in field goal attempts within 3 feet of the basket. Obviously, not every foul call, not every shooting foul is occurring within 3 feet of the basket, but a lot of them are. And if the Timberwolves are top 10 in field goal attempts within 3 feet, they're actually 12th in layup attempts per game and 10th in dunk attempts per game league wide. How are they 22nd in free throw attempts per field goal attempt? Now, they're also the league leader in 3-point attempts per game. So they're top 10 in shots at the rim, and they're number 1 in 3-point attempts. So that's going to factor into it a little bit. But if you're top 10 in attempts at the rim, you should also be a little bit higher than 22nd in terms of free throw rate. So that's at some point got to even out a little bit. Maybe the Wolves get called for less fouls and they draw more fouls, and those numbers come together. Ultimately, I think that'll help the Timberwolves. It obviously would help the Timberwolves if they commit less fouls and draw more fouls. So that's one place where we could see some clear improvement just because of the regression or progression to the mean, because it's got to happen at some point. So I just want to throw that out there in terms of the disparity. I've had some theories throughout the season. There's been a couple of games in particular that have been officiated really poorly, but that's something that um, even if it's fluky, it's notable that there's that big of a gap in terms of fouls committed versus fouls drawn. So something to keep an eye on. We'll definitely check back on that later this season. Here probably about at the midway point. Okay, next I want to talk about the Timberwolves at the rim and specifically Anthony Edwards. So we're going to do that here next, and then we'll finish the show by talking about the upcoming schedule as well as the matchup on Friday night between the Timberwolves and the Brooklyn Nets in Brooklyn. First, let's talk about the title sponsors of today's show, and that, of course, is Truebill. Do you know why free trials renew without your consent? It's a business scam out to get you. Don't let greedy corporations pocket your money. Download Truebill to take control of your subscriptions. Truebill is the new app that helps you identify and stop paying for subscriptions you don't need, want, or simply forgot about. On average, people save up to $720 per year with Truebill because companies make subscriptions hard to cancel. Truebill makes it incredibly simple. Just link your accounts and Truebill will cancel your unwanted subscriptions in one tap. And your Truebill concierge is there when you need them to cancel unwanted subscriptions so you don't have to. Truebill has over 2 million users and has helped save them over $100 million. Don't fall for subscription scams. Start canceling today at truebill.com/LockedOnNBA. Go right now. Truebill.com/LockedOnNBA could save you thousands a year. Truebill.com/LockedOnNBA. Okay, let's talk about making shots at the rim. I griped about this a little bit after the Timberwolves lost on Wednesday. And Anthony Edwards in particular really struggled at the rim in that game. There's been a couple of those in the last week where I don't know if he's athletic enough he can avoid contact and still make shots, right? We've seen him do that. We've seen him, with acrobatic reverse layups, but occasionally it's too much for his own good and he just misses shots that he should otherwise make. He's also had some issues with some of those scoop layups when he gets out a little bit wide, almost kind of to the edge of the paint and tries to scoop the ball up and in around the defender. And he hasn't had great accuracy on that. Um, However, the numbers weren't actually as bad as I expected them to be when I did dig into it in terms of his field goal percentage at the rim. Um, his number of field goal attempts at the rim are actually down this year. He's only attempting 28% of his field goals at the rim versus just under 31% last year. And by at the rim, I mean within 3 feet of the rim. This is according to Basketball References numbers. But he's shooting 64.4% within 3 feet, which is fine. League average is right around 60%. And it's just a hair under where he was last year, 64.7%. So he's above league average at the rim. You'd like to see that number be a little bit better for Anthony Edwards because he's ultra athletic and he's really big and he's got great touch. So you'd still like to see it come up a little bit, but it's hard to complain about above league average, especially when still just a hair under a third of his attempts are coming from there. Now, his free throw rate, that's really kind of another story. That's down significantly this year, which again, going back to what I said last segment, if his shots at the rim are only down this much, his free throw rate shouldn't be down, almost a half free throw per game, which is what it is, or a half free throw, I should say, per field goal attempt. And actually on a per game basis, it's down. His free throw attempts are down 0.3 per game. So he's getting less calls at the rim. He's also finishing at a slightly lower clip. And I would expect it to be a little bit better for Ant. I think part of it is technique, part of it's frustration, Part of it is he's too athletic for his own good, and he's trying to avoid the contact. Now, I don't want him to absorb too much contact and obviously, risk getting injured or getting bruised and battered this early in the season. But, uh, you know, he's big enough. He should be able to, and we've seen him do it, absorb contact and finish plays and generate and one opportunities. He's done that. So far this season, he has, according to Basketball Reference, 8 and ones. So far this year, he had 34 last year in 72 games. So he's just a hair behind that pace, actually a little more than a hair behind that pace, where that was last year. And again, I don't understand why he doesn't get more calls. At this point, he's a borderline star in this league already, and he should be getting some more of those calls. So I compared him to the rest of the team. And at NBA.com, which is just, I like the way that they do this a little bit better than at Basketball Reference. NBA stats.nba.com has less than 5 feet instead of less than 3 feet. And on the Timberwolves, within 5 feet, Anthony Edwards is, if you look at rotation players, he's 7th on the team in field goal percentage at the rim. He's behind Patrick Beverley, by the way, leads the way at 68%. He's obviously got less attempts, but he's still 1.5 a game, 68% at the rim. Jaden McDaniel, 65%, believe it or not, on 2 attempts per game. Naz Reid, 64% on just under 4 attempts per game. Naz is fantastic at the rim. Taurean Prince under 1 attempt per game. Karl-Anthony Towns is 62.4% at the rim. Vanderbilt's over 60%. Anthony Edwards down at 58.8%. I'm saying at the rim. This is less than 5 feet. So Ant's only 59% essentially within 5 feet. That number should be higher. And it's frustrating that it's not a little bit higher. And again, that he's not drawing more fouls. I say that not to rip on Ant because he's getting the shots at the rim. But if he simply was getting the calls to the level he was last year and he maybe drove 1 or 2 more times a game, think about what those numbers could look like for him. As it is, you look at his per game numbers, he's up over 22 points a game. He's shooting 43% from the field. And he's still only attempting 3.5 free throws per game. If you add a couple more free throw attempts per game, even 1.5 more free throw attempts per game, say he shoots a hair better at the rim, and you're talking about a guy who's averaging 25 points a game, and his 3-point shooting percentage is already up to just a shade under 35% on the year, which is up over 33% last season. So we may be on the cusp of seeing this breakthrough because he's going to get more calls. He's going to shoot better at the rim as he gets more experience and understands he can go through people. He doesn't have to go around them. He's obviously trying to go over them all the time. But at some point, he's going to start to get more of these calls. As a team, the Timberwolves have struggled at the rim this year as well. Again, if league average is 60%, and the Timberwolves, take out Taurean Prince because the number of attempts are really low, the Timberwolves only have 4 guys that are in the rotation that are shooting over league average from at the rim, and the majority of the rotation is below league average. So they've got to improve a little bit there if they want to see the offensive efficiency continue to improve. So that'll be something to keep an eye on for sure. All right, next I want to look at the schedule upcoming. It gets brutal, and the brutal stretch has already begun. I want to look at that, and then briefly the Wolves-Nets preview. The Nets are one of the league's best teams. Timberwolves take them on at Barclays Center on Friday night. We're going to talk about that here next. First, though, let's talk about our friends at Built Bar. This holiday season, grab the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, or even better than a candy bar. Built Bar, filled with so much holiday goodness, rich with decadent flavor, covered in chocolate, but amazingly low in calories, sugar, net carbs, and fat, and high in protein. You get the best of both worlds, delicious and healthy. So many flavors you'll have a hard time choosing. Will you have raspberry or mint brownie, cherry or double chocolate, cookies and cream, or peanut butter brownie? Built Bar gives you that extra fuel you need to bust down those mall doors and battle all the holiday shoppers. Or if you're just standing in endless shopping lines, Built Bar can give you that extra something to keep you going. So throw one in your jacket or purse. You never know when you're going to need it because it's the season of peace and love. Don't bring up your favorite Built Bar at family parties. People are so passionate about their favorite flavor. I know I am. They'll fight for it and things could get out of hand. For instance, cookies and cream. I think everybody I've ever talked to really likes anything with coconut and then anything with the brownie chunks. I'll fight for those any day of the week. Are you friends with Santa? Well, tell Santa to throw a few Built Bars in those stockings. There's so many flavors. They'd make anyone's Christmas morning a happy one. Want to cozy up with something warm? Here's a holiday secret. Dip your Built Bar into a piping hot cup of cocoa. Let it melt just a little bit and give your beverage a bit of that Built Bar flavor. Plus, you'll have a nice melty Built Bar to go with it. Be sure to have a couple napkins on hand because it will, it's 100% real chocolate. It's going to get a little bit melty. Do you like some of those marshmallowy treats around the holidays? You need to get your hands on Built Bar Puffs. They're light, fluffy, and marshmallowy through and through. Different flavors, all covered in chocolate. Tastes so good. You won't believe that they're filled with protein. Go to built.com. Use promo code LOCK15. You get 15% off your order. Again, built.com, promo code LOCK15 to get 15% off your order. All right, let's talk Wolves Nets. We'll do that first, and then I want to peek at the schedule. So the Nets are one of the league's best teams, and have been all season. They're the best team in the Eastern Conference. The only two teams with better records are Phoenix and Golden State, of course, both in the West. Brooklyn's 15-6 so far this year. They've won 5 out of the last 6, and going back a little bit further, they've won 8 out of the last 10 games. Their only losses coming against the Suns and the Warriors, the aforementioned two teams that actually have better records. Besides them, the only games that they've lost are to the Bulls, Heat, Hornets, and Bucks, all of which are winning teams right now. So the Nets have been fantastic. They've made some rotation changes. Blake Griffin is no longer a regular part of the Nets rotation. And it's interesting. He, I believe, started for a good chunk of the first portion of the season, if I'm not mistaken. But now he's coming off the bench for them. Or excuse me, not even coming off the bench. He's the regular rotation, and the Nets are pretty public about that. That he's no longer part of this team's rotation. So anyway, some rotation tweaks. Obviously, no Kyrie Irving. Joe Harris is out for at least the next, I believe, 6 to 8 weeks. Ankle surgery for him. So Kevin Durant and James Harden are kind of the whole show. And everybody that scores for them, everybody that's a major part of the rotation is a little bit on the wrong side of 30, we'll say. So Durant, Harden, Patty Mills, a big part of what they do. LaMarcus Aldridge, obviously now as well. And Harden maybe hasn't been quite as efficient as we're used to seeing. He's getting to the free throw line a little bit less. His field goal percentage is down under 42%, but he's still averaging 21 points a game, and he's still James Harden. Kevin Durant's been phenomenal, one of the best players in the league so far this season, of course. And the Nets as a team, they're a top 10 offense and a top 10 defense. Not surprisingly, number 9 in offensive rating, number 8 in defensive rating. The Timberwolves, of course, are 9th in defensive rating. I think offensively, the Wolves are like 16th or 17th right now. And the Nets they don't shoot a ton of threes. They're 20th in 3-point attempts per game, but they're 3rd in percentage. They also get to the free throw line quite a bit. They're not a very good rebounding team. They don't crash the offensive glass. They're last in offensive rebounding, which will help because the Timberwolves, of course, are last in defensive rebounding. It's one of those, hey, something's got to give games. Hopefully, assuming Vanderbilt, he didn't play Monday due to flu-like symptoms, but he played Wednesday, seemed a half step slow. Hopefully he's feeling healthier, up to speed on Friday, because Vando and Towns are going to need to clean the glass. And also Towns, we don't know his status as of yet. Of course, x-rays were negative following the game on Wednesday on his lower back tailbone area. So hopefully he's able to play Friday. But if Towns and Vando can clear the glass for the Timberwolves, they shouldn't have too many problems on the defensive glass, given the Nets kind of disinterest, I guess, in offensive rebounds. So that's an area that is usually of concern for me related to the Wolves on the glass, but they should be okay. And the Nets aren't exactly, fantastic defensive rebounders either. They're 22nd in defensive rebound rate overall this season. Officially related to the injury report, the Timberwolves, this is as of late Thursday. The Timberwolves have Karl-Anthony Towns listed as questionable due to the tailbone contusion suffered on Wednesday. They also have Jaden McDaniels as questionable. He's missed the last 2 games with flu-like symptoms. Jalen Noel has been added as questionable due to a non-COVID illness. Both Edwards and Vanderbilt, who both played Wednesday, are probable due to flu-like symptoms. So they've got 4 guys on the injury report due to non-COVID illnesses. 2 are questionable, 2 are probable, and Karl-Anthony Towns is questionable due to the tailbone contusion. I speculated this on Wednesday after the game. At the time when I recorded, I did not know that the x-rays were negative. I speculated that perhaps the Timberwolves would hold him out because they have Saturday and Sunday off, so that would give him 4 full days of rest before playing on Monday. No idea as of this recording if he's going to play or not. If he plays, this should be a really fun game. I think the Timberwolves can give the Nets a run for their money because of the way that the Wolves play and because of the way that the Nets play. Some of the Nets' weaknesses line up with the Wolves' weaknesses, and so I think those are areas that the Wolves can play them to a draw. And the Nets also play fairly fast as well. So it's not like it's going to be a battle of, the more experienced team, is able to slow the game. I mean, they can slow it down if they want to, but the Nets don't. The Nets would prefer to play fast and prefer to get shots at the rim. Durant can get his shot anytime he wants. But And also, hopefully, Jaden McDaniels can play. I'd love to see him go against Kevin Durant. Vanderbilt, I think, would do okay against Durant. But I'd love to see Jaden McDaniels guard Kevin Durant. I think that'd be a ton of fun. So that's Friday night's game. We'll of course do the post game pod late Friday, so that will be up for your weekend, and then no game Saturday or Sunday. We'll be back Monday, of course, with the regular Monday through Friday schedule. Quickly though, let's look at the Timberwolves' upcoming schedule. I mentioned this the other day, and then I wrote something for Dunking with Wolves where I kind of dug into the upcoming schedule. I'm gonna pull up the exact number here. But the Timberwolves schedule is practically impossible upcoming in terms of the opposing teams they're going to face. I think it's 16 of the next 17 games are against teams that currently, as of today, have above 500 records. Now, some of them aren't by much. I mean, Atlanta, uh, Cleveland, Portland, those teams are all kind of a game above 500. But I mean, you look at the rest of this month, the Timberwolves don't have consecutive games against teams with a losing record until January 5th and 7th. That's more than a month from now against the Oklahoma City Thunder. And until then, Brooklyn, one of the best teams in the league, Atlanta, Utah, Cleveland, Portland, Denver, the Lakers, 2 games against Dallas, Utah, Boston, and then the Knicks. The Knicks are the only team, I think they're a game below 500 as of right now. And then Utah, Lakers, Clippers. Uh, and I think the Lakers are kind of right hovering around that 500 mark, but nobody's going to, I mean, LeBron James is going to be back by the time the Wolves play the Lakers again. He's already been cleared to play post COVID. So, I mean, you have to get until January 5th before they play another a clear quote unquote bad team or a tanking team. And then they get 2 against Oklahoma City, Houston, New Orleans, all in a row. So they got 4 consecutive games, January 5th to 11th, against some of the league's worst teams in the Thunder, Rockets, and Pelicans. But until then, it's going to be rough sledding. And thankfully there's, it's roughly half of them at home, half on the road. There's no road trip longer than 3 games over that stretch. So if the Timberwolves can be somewhere around 500 through that stretch, be somewhere in the, what would it be, like 17-17 or something like that as we get into the first week of January, I think they'd feel pretty good about where they're sitting. They would certainly be in the top 10 in the West because the West right now is so top heavy with Phoenix and Golden State. But sitting in that 7 to 10 range come first, second week of January would feel pretty good, I think, given how difficult the schedule is. Okay. That's all we have for you today. Again, post-game pod Friday night following Wolves Nets. Also back on Monday through Friday next week. Regular daily schedule. If you're already a subscriber or a follower of the podcast, first of all, thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen each and every day. Remember, you can listen on any platform. If you haven't watched on YouTube, please give us a subscribe, a like, a comment over there. I definitely appreciate it. You can also listen on your favorite audio platform, whether that's Apple, Google, Spotify, or perhaps the all-new Odyssey app. If you do listen on any of those platforms there as well, please review, give us 5 stars if you love the podcast. Definitely appreciate that, and it goes a long way. And I can't say enough how much I appreciate it. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves, and then my account is at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, CKEN. That's all we have for today. Thanks again for listening to Locked On Wolves, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Podcast Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.